The Universal House of Horrors was a year-round haunt attraction that took guests at Universal Studios Hollywood through the history of horror movies, featuring locations like Frankenstein's lab, Dracula's castle, but also more modern and contemporary locations like a morgue inspired by Dawn of the Dead and Chucky's toy factory. This place scared the hell out of me as a kid, and with it officially being spooky season now, I thought there'd be no better time to discuss the history of the Universal House of Horrors. The location of the House of Horrors has drastically changed throughout the years, so I figured we would start back at the beginning. The location would first be used in 1977 with the Victoria Station restaurant. It was essentially a huge social hub at Universal themed around a turn-of-the-century trolley station, and the station would extend from the park's entrance all the way to Universal Boulevard. They even had trolleys from the parking lot leading to the restaurant. It really seemed like this is the spot where most of the guests at the time would hang out. Even the stunt actors from the Miami Vice stunt show would often come out there after the show and sign autographs and stuff. It was a huge hub for the park, and this would last a full 20 years before it would be demolished in 1997. A few years later, in the great year of 1999, Limp Bizkit was inciting riots at Woodstock, and with the up-and-coming Y2K apocalypse around the corner, Universal opened a Marvel-themed restaurant called Marvel Mania. This would be Universal's attempt to create a restaurant experience similar to the Rainforest Cafe and Planet Hollywood. And if you want to know the history of the Rainforest Cafe, you can check out my video. I'll leave a link in the description, and you can click that little eye up top. Marvel Mania building would feature bright and colorful Marvel Comics art, and on the inside it looked like something ripped straight from the comics. They had props based around superheroes, and it kind of felt like a little in-universe Marvel museum, as well as a restaurant. TVs played Marvel cartoons on the wall, and of course, like all these themed restaurants, a heavy focus was on the gift shop. Costume characters would walk around interacting with guests dressed as various Marvel superheroes and villains, and people could order fun-themed foods like Stanwiches, which is obviously based around comic legend Stan Lee. If this opened a few years earlier, this would have probably been a success and blown up similarly to places like Hard Rock Cafe, but unfortunately in 1999 this would be a hard nail in the coffin for most of the themed restaurant industry, with both Rainforest Cafe and Planet Hollywood facing huge financial issues, and Universal at the time was looking to downsize and basically trim the fat on anything that wasn't making them money. This would cause the attraction to close within a year of it being open. I think also a lot of it deals with the fact that the idea wasn't that strong either. Rainforest Cafe takes you into a highly themed rainforest, Planet Hollywood surrounds you with movie memorabilia and props, but Marvel Mania felt very Chuck E. Cheese and highly catered to child audiences. Then in the 2000s, using the same building, they would build a small promo attraction for the stop-motion animated movie Chicken Run, which is something we've already talked about on the channel, so again, check out that video. But basically, it was a walkthrough experience themed around the Coops from Chicken Run, and it was very low budget and a very rudimentary haunt/museum attraction, but it seemed like it could have been kind of cool. The whole attraction was themed around escaping the farmers from the movie, and guests would walk through oven rooms and pie making machines, and it seemed pretty cool. You could also look at actual puppets and props from the film, and this would start the trend of this location being used for walkthrough attractions. Once Chicken Run ran out its time, Universal had a huge hit on their hands with Ron Howard's live action How the Grinch Stole Christmas. The terrifying live action comedy would be a huge hit, and to celebrate this, Universal would use the location to create the Grinch's lair. This would be themed around the Grinch's home from the movie, and actors dressed as a Grinch would walk around and interact with guests. This would be another family-friendly maze, but I would argue this would have actually scared the hell out of me as a kid. For whatever reason, I don't know, I just always found the live-action Grinch movie really weird and creepy. All the prosthetics, all the Who's, everything, especially, the younger flashback scenes of the Grinch as a baby and when he's like a child. It's just gross and terrifying, and honestly, none of the Who's had any right making fun of him because they looked like that. So I don't know, this movie is nightmare fuel for me. Anywho, in May of 2001, Universal would convert this into a walkthrough attraction themed around the Revenge of the Mummy, and this would lay the foundation for the House of Horrors. A lot of the structures and show elements built for this would basically be reused and repurposed for up-and-coming walkthrough attractions, and eventually the House of Horrors. The maze would be themed around the second movie of the franchise and advertise itself as a tour of the haunted sets used in the movie. This would also be the tester that would lead the company to make the Revenge of the Mummy ride a few years later. Similar to Chicken Run, it would feature props used in the movie, and guests would walk through the abandoned temple facing things like flying beetles, spinning tunnels, and of course, mummies. And I'm not gonna lie, based on old footage, this looked incredibly well done, and the whole experience took almost 10 minutes to complete. I really wish Universal would take more risks with stuff like this. I think, sort of temporary attraction museum/walkthrough experiences are really fun, and they used to do them in the past past on a lighter level with stuff like the Leica exhibits and everything. So I just really wish we could get more of that stuff back, because it kept me coming back to the park to check out whatever was new. The Revenge of the Mummy walkthrough, though, didn't seem like it was insanely scary. They kind of dumbed down Horror Nights maze for daytime audiences, but it chose to focus more on the environment than the scares, and it really did pay off. It looked great. This would last all the way until 2004 and was a hit at the park. People seem to really like having a daytime scary attraction that they test their bravery in. So riding off this high and using another Stephen Sommers horror action movie, Universal rethemed the Revenge of the Mummy maze to be themed around Van Helsing, and it would be called Van Helsing Fortress Dracula. The attraction would take guests through the spooky supernatural world of 19th century Transylvania, and it would be all themed around Dracula's castle. Guests would explore the crypt, encountering flying bat monsters, and they would also walk through skull-filled catacombs and encounter werewolves. Take a lot of what was built for the Mummy and just repurpose it, so just making this Egyptian temple into a European castle. And this building is 2 stories, meaning all of these mazes would take guests upstairs and downstairs, leading to this multi-level, really long horror experience. There were these really cool catwalks that would kind of give you a view of all the levels and kind of show you what was happening below you. And the Mummy maze also apparently had slides to the bottom floor, but due to congestion, this was eventually removed. The Mummy laid out the blueprint, and Van Helsing just picked up the torch. Van Helsing, for being a semi-permanent attraction, also seemed to be really well themed, but considering the fact that I'm looking at this all from low-res camera footage, I can't really tell. Despite the film being considered a critical failure, the attraction would last 2.5 years before closing in November of 2006. Van Helsing took parts left over from the E.T. adventure for all the pine trees and the maze, and actually most of the theming was just reusing old props, which is kind of genius for Universal considering that they were cutting as many costs as possible. The official beginning of the House of Horrors would unofficially start in 2006. Helmed by HHN creative director John Murdy, during the first year of Halloween Horror Nights, they would lightly re-theme Van Helsing. Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios Hollywood was just getting its start, and they had pretty limited offerings for that year, with there being a very different version of the terror tram that we know today, and a maze called the Asylum, and then of course the newly rebranded House of Horrors. All they could really do was add more horror movie characters and props into the maze, featuring characters like Freddy Krueger, Chucky, Michael Myers, Leatherface, Hannibal Lecter, the Dracula's Bride, the Wolfman from Van Helsing, and a clown, and a bunch of random Dracula minions. This idea of making a house with every character they could get the license for was actually really fun and refreshing, and again, nobody cared about the Van Helsing theme, but loved the idea of a permanent haunted house. So Universal was ready to get rid of the Van Helsing specific sets, and decided, because of the success of this Horror Nights maze, to take away any of the Van Helsing theming and then just kind of repurpose a lot of the Dracula's castle scenes into a new House of Horrors maze. They would also build sets for each specific horror movie character to kind of give them their own little environments. And due to licensing issues, they wouldn't be able to get every single horror movie character that they had at the Horror Nights rebranding, but the House of Horrors would feature characters like Dracula's Brides, the Mummy, Chucky, Norman Bates' mother, the Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, Nosferatu, the Phantom, and obviously Universal can get all the permanent rights to characters like Freddy and Michael, which is kind of a disappointment. It would be really cool if we could actually get like a huge mashup of horror icons, but again, I completely understand where they're coming from, especially considering how convoluted horror movie licenses are. Nonetheless, the House of Horrors featured many classic Universal monsters and gave them the opportunity to have a more modern audience. This was also such a cheap and effective way to boost attendance, and they would just reuse props and use licenses that they already had. The attraction would open in March of 2007, and guests would flock to experience the next iteration in Universal daytime haunted houses. It seemed like it was ultimately very well received, and horror fans loved having a spot in the park dedicated just for them. So let's unpack what you would see walking through the House of Horrors. Guests would start by walking through a castle-like facade, which I really love. Like, the lettering on this sign is just perfect. I don't know, it's very nostalgic for me, so maybe that's why. But inside is the majority of the queue, where guests would get to walk around this mini museum dedicated to classic Universal monsters, showing props and photos from various franchises featured in the house. There's this really cool wall of like all the face molds from various horror movie actors, and they would take these molds back in the day in order to fit like prosthetics perfectly to each actor's face. They actually still do this. I just thought it was really cool that they added like a wall of all of these actors. You can literally see exactly what their faces looked like up close. I don't don't know, that sounds weird now that I say it. The queue had Chucky dolls, house models, and set schematics, and it was very cool for any visiting horror fan. After the queue, start off by walking through Dracula's castle / catacombs, which is only slightly changed from the Van Helsing attraction, removing things like skeletons impaled on stakes and other Van Helsing based memorabilia. And at the end of this section, guests would get jump scared by Nosferatu. Next, guests would enter another Gothic-esque building where they would see statues of the Phantom of the Opera. He's like strangling people with ropes, as well as a really cool looking giant organ. Also at the end of this section, there would be another statue of the red mask Phantom, and he's kind of hiding in a window cracking a grin. What's cool about this is that they would actually use a screen-used outfit from the actual movie. And next, guests would walk through a mummy section where you'd have to walk through a hallway filled with mummy statues themed around an Egyptian tomb, and of course one of the mummies would actually be a live actor. After leaving the mummy room, you would enter this kind of warehouse space that is themed around a toy factory that's run by Chucky, and these would use that classic haunted house pop-up effect similar to what you'll see in a haunted mansion, you know, like the heads popping up behind the graves, but this time it would actually be little Chuckies popping up, leading guests to one final scare with an actor actually dressed up as Chucky. Guests would then walk through another hallway where you'd see a projection of Igor, I guess like kind of messing with Frankenstein's monster with a torch or like trying to lead him away. This would then lead you to a catwalk which would give you a view of Frankenstein's lab on the floor below you. You'd then pass a theme section based around Psycho, which seems to look like some sort of dusty attic with little trinkets thrown around, and in the center of this would be Norman Bates' mom sitting in a rocking chair. Sometimes she'd pop out at people. The rest of the Psycho section of this house would be a mirror maze where Norman Bates' mom would then pop out at you again, and of course they're going to be playing the Psycho theme and score from the movie. Then we go on to another hallway which is themed around like a morgue and inspired by Dawn of the Dead. There would be zombie projections on the walls and hanging bodies that people would have to push their way through. This would lead to the spooky staircase that would take you down to the lab set from earlier, leading to the ET Forest / Wolfman section where you'd walk through the leftover forest queue from the ET ride, and it'd have a statue of the Wolfman holding a woman in his wolfy arms, which looks a little bit different from the original Wolfman. It's a little bit more dog-like, and then the actor behind the tree that would eventually pop out at you also looks like a different type of Wolfman, which just looks more like a classic, like Halloween, like almost Michael Jackson's Thriller kind of Wolfman. So I don't know, I feel like Universal, like they don't really like how the original Wolfman looks. Onto my least favorite part, which would be the spinny tunnel, and it was just this purple and green lit spinny tunnel with pentagrams and other symbols on it. I don't know, I just find these spinny tunnels very like carnival-esque and kind of tacky, and all they do is really make you sick. I get that it's supposed to be like catching you off guard. Considering the fact that everything else was so well themed, this just feels a little out of place. Universal really used to love those spinny tunnels though, as you'll find out if you watch my studio tour video. We talk about all the spinny tunnels. It's crazy. Finally, you would enter the lab and encounter an actor playing Dr. Frankenstein, surrounded by various electrified lab equipment. He was working on Frankenstein's monster, and when you'd walk past him, he would come alive and break off his gurney and, of course, scare you. This would be the climax of the show and would lead you through a couple more gothic interior switchbacks that eventually lead you to an exit. And that was pretty much the experience. It wasn't anything incredible, and in fact, it was a very cost-cutting, slapped-together project that was Universal just trying to find a way to get as much money as possible, but nonetheless, it was an 8-minute long, highly themed walk through haunted house, and it was a place for those classic Universal monsters to still stay relevant with modern audiences. I also think, considering the fact that Universal didn't have many offers at this time, it was a much needed and loved attraction by guests who would go often. And I love this attraction so much. I really wish we still had something Universal monsters themed. I know Epic Universe is getting a ride, but we don't have anything. We don't even have a permanent haunt attraction anymore. But I guess now is the time where we talk about how it became extinct. Universal Hollywood, being Universal Hollywood, pulled a move for space-saving reasons. The House of Horrors was an incredibly large location, and it was located right in front of Universal, meaning that there wasn't much of like a main entrance walkway or anything that felt like it was actually a cohesive theme park. It was a bunch of random stuff and a haunted house immediately on your left as you'd walk in, and I think they canned this for many reasons. One of them, of course, is money. The House of Horrors took a valuable space and it wasn't as popular in the end of its life, and couple the fact that they had to pay actors daily just to keep the attraction running, Universal probably felt like this was a giant aging money sink and they could use it for something better. Then in 2014 they would announce the closure and hold the final night of the House of Horrors and do a cute little closing ceremony where they would all the monsters would bow. It's adorable, especially the Chucky. But then on November 25th, 2014, they demolished the building and they would replace it with, well, pretty much just stores to sell more stuff and Starbucks, probably because they only had one Starbucks on the lower lot, so they really needed to get in that extra location. But this would be a fairly large renovation of the whole main street leading down Universal Studios Hollywood, and it would give it this 1920s old Hollywood, very Art Deco, Spanish style kind of feel, which I really do like. I think the new walkway looks beautiful. I just really wish it wasn't at the sacrifice of the House of Horrors. And now it's just a huge walkway that's just filled with stores based around whatever IP they have in the park. This is a really sad replacement, but nothing would be sadder when Universal would try to bring back the Daily Haunt with a half-baked, super small Walking Dead themed haunted house. But again, I think I'll cover that in another video because this video is already so long. That was pretty much it. That was the history of the House of Horrors. I hope you guys really did like this video. I'm trying to pump out as many as I can, but yeah, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys want more stuff about Universal, old Universal, then I will continue making that. Honestly, I'm at your whim, so let me know what you guys want from this channel. I'm kind of just testing the waters and doing videos that I wanna. So hope you guys have a good one. Please like, comment, and subscribe again, and I'll catch you guys out in the next one. Bye.